Welcome, dear friends. My name is Julia Balaz. I'm coming to you from the east coast of Ireland, and today I'm joined by Ursula O'Farrell, coming to you from California. Today we are inspired to talk about sacred geometry, and in particular, the art that is infused or embedded by sacred geometry. And our hope, our intention with this video today is to inspire you to bring sacred geometry into your lives, into your homes in one way or another, so that you too can benefit from the transformational, positive influence of sacred geometry. So I want to say that Ursula is our dear beloved member of the community of Galactic Astrology enthusiasts and Galactic Astrology researchers, and she has contributed so much to the community for the well-being of everyone there, that I feel truly honored and privileged to hold this space today to allow Ursula to share some of her stories and experiences with sacred geometry as an artist. Ursula is wearing many hats and she's wearing them really well, but today, in this moment, we allow for her to talk about something that is very dear to her heart, I believe. So I can't wait to hear some of her background stories and also to showcase some of her incredible art. So welcome, Ursula.
Thank you, Julia. It's really an honor and a little bit, I don't know, I'm so excited with an invitation to start sharing about how pivotal, as we move into more galactic consciousness, how are we going to communicate? How are we going to receive information and develop a language of light going forward? So I'm a little nervous because I realize it's not just about art that I have created, but it's this foundation of how has sacred geometry shown up in nature and in the art of the ages. And then, Julie, I mentioned to you that you and I both love astrologer Pam Gregory. And in March of 22, March 11th, Pam invited a guest named Janet Treelore. And Janet is a channeler for an entity named Zac that's connected to Dwal Kul, the master. So in that conversation, I just was painting and listening, Julia. And then suddenly Zac said, the communication between our heart and the cosmos is through frequency and sacred geometry. And I'm going to say that again because I fell out of my chair. I had to go back and listen. So the communication between our hearts, whether it's our physical heart, our higher heart, and the cosmos, as we study galactic astrology with your insights, is going to be through frequency, I imagine sound, and sacred geometry. And then when Pam and you were having your conversation, I remember feeling this idea that perhaps following that conversation, you mentioned to me that, yes, you have the geometry, the masculine, perhaps holding the angles together, but it's this beautiful feminine flow from the Divine Mother, the divine cosmos, that's activating and electrifying that which is angular to that which is the feminine. And I'm holding that as energetic, masculine, feminine. Do you remember having that thought?
Yes.
Or was I dreaming?
Yes. And what an amazing, amazing quote. I had goosebumps as you said it. I believe I've experienced that quote in life through meditating on sacred geometry, on Metatronic Cube. I believe I communicated with Cosmos and I received and downloaded the story of Cosmos through just meditating on sacred geometry. So it certainly is powerful, and it feels to me like quantum technology, and perhaps it's underestimated, in most people's minds. So I really hope that this cute little video will inspire people to start paying more attention, because there's so much to it and the potential of it is beautiful. especially for anyone that is on a path of ascension, right? Of expansion of consciousness towards greater connectivity, greater understanding, greater harmony and well-being.
Exactly. And so it's no coincidence, like as you moved your home within Ireland from one beautiful place to another, that you still put this beautiful flower of life behind you. So that is a sacred geometry, but there is. So I'm going to just pause and ask you, why do you continue to put that one up on the wall behind you?
Yeah, we started noticing many years ago. I can't remember how long ago it was that we started being drawn. I think it was more Marek, my wonderful, wonderful, darling husband, who started ordering sacred geometry art for our house. And we have it as coasters, as stickers on our electronic devices. We have it as different forms of art. And as I reflect back on it, it kind of happened so organically. We just kind of felt drawn to it more and more. I feel our lives have transformed in so many ways for better. There seemed to be greater prosperity, greater peace and harmony in our lives. I really feel like it is impacting our homes in a very, very positive way. There's no doubt about it. Yeah.
It's so fascinating because as you hold behind you in resonance that beautiful flower of life, behind my head is the masculine equivalent of the 64-point unity grid. So if you connect each of these points, these are angular, it's more star-like, Julia, and you're holding behind your head the feminine equivalent. Now that image behind you was found in Abydos, Egypt. It was inscribed in the temple's wall. They don't know how it was inscribed. It's so amazingly ancient for one, but two, it's so specific and not just one time. This is the Osirian temple in Abydos, Egypt. And there's a book by Freddie Silva, who's an archaeoastrologer. He was tracking some of the sacred geometries around the world, and he wrote a book called The Divine Blueprint. Well, it's very interesting because there's a hidden shape here that actually spoke to me, and I had an experience that I'd love to share with you. But before that, I wanted to make a comment how that theory that hidden in plain sight, we got to watch the Da Vinci Code movie. Things from were hidden, whether you're in the Masonic group or not, that helped build America, let's say, but hidden in plain sight. So sometimes the sacred geometry is relegated to a bushel called, or a label called decorative art, or art that makes me feel good because I'm doing yoga and then I'm wearing it. But if you study and go deeper into the potential of sacred geometry, it is actually a healing transmitter and a receiver, because it's mirroring back to us, Julia, the energy we already carry. That shape behind you, again, in the Osirian, is a creation shape. And I started watching some of Jane 108, this fascinating man who gives free webinars. He was talking about how the code creation of the pentahexa, the 5 with the 6, is everything goes back to the shape behind you and the shape behind me. It's almost like our bodies throughout the ages recognize this co-creation shape. It's the seed of life, the fruit of life, the tree of life, the flower of life. It's all of life. So hidden in plain sight are these amazing images. Now, you don't have to own a piece of art, just seeing an image, watching this video, going into meditation. Now, before I talk about me, I think you may have mentioned, have you ever meditated and seen particular geometries?
Yeah, so in front of my bed, about 2 meters ahead of me, I used to, before I fall asleep, I would stare at Flower of Life with Metatronic Cube in it. It had blue background. So on this particular night, I decided to meditate on it, do breath work, sacred breath work, just stimulating theta brainwave frequency. And maybe, I don't know, 20 minutes into it, the art stood out. It became three-dimensional, and it started moving. And I felt actually I have to say, I felt DMT being released into my body. And I have this weird thing with my body where I'm extremely sensitive to what's going through my veins. If I have a sip of wine, I would tell you within, I don't know, 2 minutes or however long it takes, I would feel when it goes through the walls of my stomach and when it hits my bloodstream, as an example. Or even dark chocolate, I would feel it when it's in my bloodstream. So I'm also very sensitive to that. And I remember it first time from my QHHT sessions when I was regressed through hypnosis and I felt DMT being released. So I knew that was it, but I think that's why I was able to perceive the story and receive the download from the sacred geometry. And as it, it didn't have any words. I didn't hear any words. There was no sound, but there were so many different shapes hidden within that sacred shape that somehow my brain was able to understand what it was saying or what it obtained. And what it obtained was story of creation from aeons that is timeless. There is no past or future. It's timeless. And you cannot really comprehend it in a better brainwave state. You really have to go into altered state of consciousness to perceive timelessness. But there was one point where I noticed that it was very masculine, the geometry, and I was really only perceiving the lines. And when I realized that, I said, where's the feminine in this? And that's when the lines receded into the background, and the energy that moves through the lines, as you described earlier so beautifully, came out. And I had a knowing that the feminine is one with the masculine. The masculine holds the shape, but the feminine is the frequency that is connecting everything and making everything alive. So it was very, very beautiful, profound experience. And it continued with stories of the complexity of creation and how there is polarity in it, in the physical, and that we have to embrace both the shadow and the light equally, that we cannot deny the creative potential of the shadow side, because it can be as marvelous and incredible as the light side, and that in essence it's neutral from the creator's perspective, and that there is time for everything, there are cycles, and that the creator is always eager to continue evolving and creating something new that wasn't yet before within the shape of the sacred geometry. That was one day experience, and I think week or two later, follow up tuning into this. And on that occasion, I was shown different geometry that I haven't seen before, that was not necessarily within the same pattern. And I felt like I'm tuning into different universes that have different geometry and different laws and just slight different. And they all had different flavor, different frequencies. Some of them felt very graceful, and some of them felt more like warrior almost like, but not necessarily for war and conquer, but just very strong. Some were more feminine, some were more masculine, but different colors were coming through as well. It was quite extraordinary. So there's so much that's hidden within it. It's quite simple when it's like that, but once you do what you do there, Ursula, adding different colors to it and shades, you're really bringing more life into it. There is so much story hidden within your, I believe, channeled art. I'm sure if we dissected your different painted art, we could receive so much about your soul history, and perhaps something that is the benefit of humanity, because it wanted to be somehow imprinted into this reality and be present here, perhaps as an archetypal experience of many souls sharing in one way or another. So I find it quite fascinating, the potential of it,
Yeah, in fact, a little bit of my story was, we were all so excited about the 2012 when 12/12/12 came, or 12/21/12. So I just drove myself down the south coast of California to Big Sur, to a place called Nepenthe. It is the river of forgetfulness, and there's a perch overseeing the whole Pacific Ocean. And I waited, and I pulled into the parking lot unknowingly at 12:12 in the afternoon, and I sat and I waited. What am I to do for the shift? Can I get clarity here of why I'm here in this now moment? I'm so excited. And I waited and I journaled and I waited, and nothing was coming through, Julia, until I got in my car and I was leaving the parking lot and I heard a voice. And I don't usually hear voices, but this was so clear. It said, "Painter, light of God." And then I started crying, because I'm like, oh, that's so huge. But, now we're 10 years later in 2022, and I sit with myself and say, what if I allowed myself to paint the light of source? Just let it come through. But I have this background as a professional figure painter, right? So working in the figure, abstract figuration, showing in, years ago, 11 art galleries nationally. And so I have this, this brand and this image, but to my own self be true. I just thought, it's time to shift. And I went dormant and I went inside. And the more I went inside myself, there were these emotional abstractions coming through. So from the body, moving inward, and even when I did the body, I was half looking and more just expressing. So going inside was an easy journey, but this emotional energy is really what makes us human, but allowing the full range of pathos. See, sometimes we're saying, oh, be nice, be a good girl, don't say anything, just be sweet. But the full range of the human experience is the lowest low and the highest high. And how do I bring that into art and not be ashamed of it, but to allow human energy, emotions. And as we learn about the galactic, we understand it separates us out from other entities that don't have emotional intelligence. So the further I went into my heart, then you start finding these matrices. And so people in the art world would look at me and say, what are you doing? It's like a whole other personality came up. But I was in a sacred geometry class. And while I was in the class, I felt someone poke the back of my heart. And I switched around and went, who's touching me? And I saw this image of a double pentagon that was abutted. And it is the exact image, and I'll show you in my art, that connected me to the Osirian temple in Abydos, Egypt. So I just painted it from 2015 onward, and I haven't stopped. But I feel like I'm creating more of a Stargate nursery. I'm coming out and sharing this publicly now because my older self, who was worried about what are people going to think of me, she has been embraced and said, you know what, thank you. But today I'm going to track what feels good and what the play with the seriousness, the researcher with the inner child. And so when Pam Gregory's guest says, this communication between the heart and the cosmos being held together with frequency and sacred geometry, I do feel like Mother Ursula with a Stargate nursery, that my job is to birth and bring these images forward. And when it's the right time, Julia, they're kind of already buzzing, right? They're buzzing with activation. And I'll just share lastly that this idea of wanting to create healing transmitters as art. So it's not like decoration, but they're basically to be on a wall to be able to say, do you want to engage or not? For those of us who may want to bridge, because some people can see things, feel things, hear things, their clairsentience is growing. But for me, it's like, well, what if we created an image and I put like crystals at the angles to help activate even more, but taking responsibility for what I was birthing into the world. I wanted to bring in something that would help perhaps the future. And it's okay if it's not resonating now. There's divine timing here, but somehow working and learning through your class has empowered me to say, as I go into the cosmos, because the further you go in, this is Vega ancestry talking, the more we go in, we find that we meet ourselves out into the cosmos, and like a toroidal field, we're back into the body, into our emotions, into the heart and the hara, and then we're back into the matrices, not just of Gaia, and not just our planets, planetology, but it's the whole heavens and the whole metaverses. And so you start talking about the galactic attractor, the Shapley attractor, the super galactic, the galactic. It's suddenly these matrices and the sacred geometry, it just starts going. And last, I keep saying lastly, but this is what's called a Sri Yantra. This is a specific geometry that if anyone has met the hugging saint Amma has hugged thousands, millions of people. This is the mother of all sacred geometries. A Sri Yantra can hold your prayer. So let's say you want to intend healing for someone or yourself. This is where bringing in the Hindu or Vedic or story from around the world and bringing it into the language of 2022, light language held in geometries that are not just pure decoration.
So beautiful. I have to say, I've tangibly benefited from meditating on Sri Yantra too. Usually when it was scarcity moments and when I was working on transmuting limiting beliefs about self-worth, which is always then reflected in reality in terms of abundance and prosperity. And it was usually in those lowest moments many years ago when I reached for Sri Yantra, and I believe it helped me shift the experience completely. So definitely worth exploring. It's very, very powerful, very high vibe. And just one more thing to touch on of what you said, how it brings us out and back in. I really feel like sacred geometry has that effect because it's so pure, no words, no labels. You know, we can get lost in all kinds of labels, especially in this new age spirituality, the light language. There's so many different new words in terms of terminology, but when you meditate or connect to sacred geometry, there is none of that. It's much more simple, deep, profound, and it helps you return to your origins, right?
Hidden in plain sight.
Yeah.
You know, it's almost like the more you go into within our bodies, our DNA, the you know, Greg Braden tracking the God code,
Yes.
and then finding space and a sound of God. It's like we're so connected to everything. And so we can point to, oh, yes, we see this image in the pine cone and it relates to our pineal. Yes, but did you know it's bigger than that? It's this Mandelbrot fractalization of that hermetic law, as you know, Julia, as within, so without. And it's remarkable that we're living. So here's some practical wisdom. You don't have to buy anything. It's this intention that I'm going to find an image that I relate to, and I'm just going to take a JPEG and I'll sit with it and allow it to talk to me, or I'm going to allow myself to talk to it, to open the conversation both ways. And I know people have seen for each chakra, there's a beautiful geometry. And that's terrific, but you will find your own. And I have a hunch, Julia, that may, whatever image does come through, may indicate a very important galactic family that we'll find in Hector's calculator.
Yeah, when I had that transmission of witnessing different geometries, it felt like universes, but it could have also just been different galaxies, or it could have been different star systems. I'm not sure because there were no words, and I actually did not take time to validate and ask and then receive answer. I was just witnessing them in awe. I've also came across someone who was a big into sacred geometry for, let's say, a decade or even two. And as of recently, maybe last year, he felt like he needs to pull back from focusing on it, and as if something else new is coming in, as if it almost felt like he has integrated all there was to integrate from this particular flower of life. And now he felt like he cannot look at it any longer. There is something else coming. So if there is someone like that here, listen to that inner guidance and just be open to further evolution, right?
That's what I'm sensing too, that suddenly in quantum, we're doing a layering of various geometries. It's no longer singular or linear, that there's a multiplicity of layering of geometries. And you brought up Metatron's cube. And so maybe 3 or 4 years ago, I was wondering, wow, we're shifting from the flower of life into Metatron's cube. And here comes the Archangel Metatron and this image. You know, he's typically the angel that is geometry, right? But here's this idea that what is the image that will move us into the Aquarian age? And Metatron's cube was a huge bridge. And then I think there's more as we go uber galactic metaverse. So I'm sensing layering of imagery. What I've created is basically in the moment without the mind. I had to tell myself, I'm a painter, and the light of source will show up as it wants to if I just get out of my way and not try and worry, how is it going to be received? So, or what am I going to do with all of these paintings? That's not my job. My job is to, when you invite me to come have a chat, it's to say, okay, thank you, because I knew there was something coming up now in this moment, 2022, and we're shooting this on 10/10/2022. So we have this beautiful, basically an elevator shaft. I think the angelic realm is here. Whatever else wants to come through in this conversation, Julia, it goes beyond, but I do think it's this geometry with frequency that will guide anyone who's hearing this if they choose to, like, just stop and tune inward.
Yes, there is such a wide variety of artists available to choose from at this point. It's fascinating to see how much you can actually sense the galactic frequencies coming through, different star systems coming through. Some of them are truly outwardly, and yours has very unique flavor as well. It's very feminine, soft. There is a story in it as well. There is so much in your art. I would love to actually get to a point when we can show some of it. If you would like to share your screen, please.
Oh, I will. So just so folks know, I actually have 2 websites, figurative work, but this is a new one that's called Art of the Akash. So Art of the Akash, when I talk about this idea of going off the timeline into quantum, where we can basically create that which is already created. So the Art of the Akash is kind of a little game I play with myself, already created, already birthed. And so what we're seeing here, here's Metatron's cube with the Taurus, with the 64-point unity star. I'm allowing myself to be painterly, to choose colors that feel good. They're typically sunset or sunrise colors. There's something about that golden moment of 2 times of the day, the very beginning and the very end, that fascinate me. Now, this one holds the double pentagons in an outward shape of the 6, which is a hexagon. So this connects with the rainbow body and the Osirian temple. That's that divine blueprint coming forward now in 2022 to your viewing screen. And I'm going to make available JPEGs for anyone who wants to download and sit with an image. Happy to make these available.
Oh, wow. Thank you.
Here's Archangel energy, right? Holding in a toroidal head feeling of all that is, carrying into today's time, this beautiful 64-point grid and floral imagery around to again remind us of the feminine, but not afraid to be dark with the light, not afraid to be very supercharged color with the softer energy as well. I had a hard time talking about angels But now forget it. Let's go there all the time. This is when spirit guides and the feminine energies started coming through, listening to cryon.com, talking about the Pleiadian star mother, Elili-U. So Elili-U, the grand star mother from the Pleiades, who helped birth the human DNA, holding again the 64-point unity grid. And no words, just letting ourselves enjoy and feel into various colors that I think come from orbs that visit me. Just whatever feels right and joyful. In the galleries, they would tell me, okay, Ursula, we like your work, but please don't use pink. You know, pink doesn't sell. And so, of course, I had to go to my studio and make 20 pink paintings. So there's something in me that's like, don't tell me what to do, please.
That the beautiful thing about this sacred geometry art is that it will deliver to the viewer precisely what they're ready to receive, what they're meant to receive, and what is for their highest good. Obviously, when the painter's intention is pure, their hearts is pure, when you feel the frequency of resonance and high vibration, every viewer will see different story in the painting. So I suppose the good advice will be to obviously focus more on art that elates you, expands you, where you literally feel your heart chakra expanding, because that is a direct communication from your higher self, from your greatest wisdom, letting you know that yes, this is in resonance with your story, and we can communicate to you about you through this art if you take time to listen. So there's so many beautiful stories that I'm picking up from every single one of these gorgeous paintings. In particular, this one, if you pause here, the angelic force that is so mighty and powerful that no matter what is happening around you, the doom and gloom that may be occurring, any interference that may be occurring, the force is available, is here. The light, the protection is eternal and accessible.
Thank you. And notice it's neither male or female.
Mm-hmm.
It is energy. It's so we get tripped up in our duality consciousness with masculine, feminine, male, female. But the angelic realm, where we're moving in our crystalline DNA nature as we become more light beings in our evolution, is angelic, is allowing for both masculine and feminine. You know, I do want to say, if people enjoy the figure, this was my beginning point. So it's this idea of we have a human story, how to celebrate it, and then launch into our evolution, not just, let's say, as a painter, but as a human being. The dance of relationships with an observer. And then, of course, being a mother, bringing in
wow, these are fabulous, Ursula.
Well, thank you. Archetypal energies.
And you can see the cycle of consciousness and not the evolution, but the unraveling of life experience coming through different stages of your art creation. It's really soul touching, and it is relatable. Every single one of them is so relatable. The first sacred geometry one that you showed, actually the one that you have behind you, or no, there is another similar one that you showed first on the screen. It reminds me of Pachamama, even though the geometrical shape is masculine, but with the colors behind it feels like Pachamama held sacred masculine. And then the one with the triangular arrangement of various sacred geometrical shapes, even without seeing it being called divine support, these were the keywords that I was receiving, that this shows divine support that is coming from different cosmic forces or entities. That's beautiful. And then you have another one called Soul Family. I believe I shared it on my Instagram a while back as well, without knowing you named it or you called it Soul Family. That's that's the keyword that came out of it. So it's so amazing how the intention is infused in it as frequency, and then the receiver can get it and download it. So fascinating how our mind works.
Well, just like you take in chocolate or wine, you have a hypersensitivity, I think, to visual information, colors and shapes. And I will say, as the painter, I only intend to set the stage. I do not want you to have a particular experience only. It's like I tee it up, allowing the metaphor and the archetypes to come through. What you've helped me do, Julia, is to embrace this galactic narrative, the galactic metaphors, and remembering some of these ancient stories of the stars and the heavens, and looking at we're all a part of it. So thank you, because you've just added to my storytelling, which I bring to my YouTube channel that was also inspired this year, called the Ascension Playground. So if anyone wants to go over there and play and share comments, or even come on live with me, like Julia is inviting me out of my shell, out of my studio, to come talk about things. We had no idea that such a force of sacred geometry, it's an entity in and of itself. And I would just add, when you look at Chinese or Asian calligraphy, there are some who really understand that if you invite these spiritual entities to come and live within the art, there used to be art as icon, but we do have this ability to invite. Now, what I haven't shared with you, my process, I do bring crystals. I bring Andara energy, which is very joyful, but I also take specific crystals and add them into the water that I'm using to paint with.
Oh,
Because,
wow.
yeah, paint is really just mineral with a fluid, right? Whether it's acrylic or oil or gum arabic for watercolor. So you can infuse the material with a holy intention and ask who wants to come play, which crystal wants to be sitting in the water while we move forward. Now, I don't put it with the pigments, but what we're doing is we're using Mother Earth, Gaia, with these beautiful cadmiums. I know there's synthetic paint that's man-made, but when you use that of which is the earth, there's already an oscillation, a frequency, this vibration's already coming in with the geometry. So as the mother birthing, it's like, okay. And then I move one from the next. I don't just paint one at a time. They come through in batches now, sometimes batches of 20.
I have to say there's this healing frequency coming through all your paintings. That, like, it's there undeniably. There's something very nurturing, soothing, comforting, and healing about every single one of those that I've seen. Absolutely, art can be that powerful.
Well,
Yeah,
then you've
super well
helped me
done.
see. You've just said and given clarity. That was the whole intention, to create healing transmitters. But it takes a viewer to, the energy goes out, but you've just cycled it back to me. Do you
Yeah.
realize that? Thank you. Because it's like having clarity, because you guess yourself like, oh, why am I keep making these things? Like, shouldn't I be more practical and get them out to sell? And it's like, no, there's such joy in creation, but healing transmissions in a time that we're living in that's so pivotal, I think they're just buzzing.
I think it's beautiful. What a blessing that as you allowed the sacred geometry infused art come through you, and as you gave birth to it, introduced it into reality in your own unique way, it kind of took you on your own journey and expansion of your own consciousness, right? You have explored the gene keys, the
Human design.
human design,
I mean,
the Stargate. I would love to hear about that
oh, the
journey as
Stargate and
well.
Mount Shasta.
About the galactic astrology. So it really it activated something in your life, right? In your being.
But it took physical touch.
Mhm.
Like, I am so in my head, and I love lots of data. I have Gemini at the midheaven, but it takes these kinds of experience to say, stop, pay attention. And so when you've had these pivotal moments where you see things or hear things, so I need that. And I'm telling my guides and teams, when I'm unsure, tell me what's next. But then you showed up on the screen and it's like, okay, permission to talk about it without fear of being called, let's say the word witch or weird or abnormal. And I embrace all those terms now, like, yes, you're right. I am that and then more, because I haven't even shared the weirdest of the weird. And I just hold it as that's who Ursula is. So here we go. When you turn 60, you give yourself permission, or at least it took me this long. Maybe someone listening, if you're younger, 20s and 30s, giving yourself permission now. Imagine what you would birth and bring forward if you weren't afraid of someone else's opinion.
Way to go, way to go. Yeah, it's time for us to break free and reclaim sovereignty. If we, even just in honor of the ancestors that were prosecuted for showing their true colors, like we ought to them, to us in the past and to us in the future, to not be afraid any longer, not let other people's limitations limit our own sense of freedom and joy and creativity, right?
Yes. So sovereignty, get your halo, get your crown, step into it, because it's time. So thank you so much, Julia. I so appreciate this conversation on sacred geometry, on the galactic, on being human and permission to be and step into your own queendom, kingdom, galacticdom, because there's so much more coming. Don't you agree?
Yes. Thank you. You've opened this conversation with a beautiful quote, and I would like to close with one too. I came across it earlier today as I just YouTubed sacred geometry, and a beautiful animated video came up. I'll share the link here, and it's an awesome channel with animated background story to what is being taught. I believe it's called After School, with the school written SKOOL. I can't wait to explore more videos, but this is paraphrasing the quote. As we choose to explore sacred geometry, we begin to understand our place in the universe. And I thought it was very fitting. And it has been my experience, and clearly it has been your experience too. So I hope it inspires viewers to go down this path and just see where it takes you. May it bless your life in many ways, as it did ours. Thank you so much.
Enjoy.
Much love. Cheerio.